All right, let's get right into this explainer. Welcome. Today we're unpacking a massive, literally tectonic shift in how the entire world does business. We're talking about CBAM and the green competitive advantage. You see, for decades, the global economy has run on a very specific set of rules, mostly just ignoring the environmental toll of how things are actually made. But that is all about to change in a really profound way. We are moving away from an era where pollution was essentially free into an era where clean energy is the absolute ultimate market lever.
So what if polluting just wasn't profitable anymore? Sounds like a total environmentalist pipe dream, right? But honestly, what we're looking at here isn't just wishful thinking. It's the new mathematical reality of global trade. The age-old logic that dirtier, cheaper production always wins is being flipped completely upside down. It's essentially an economic revolution disguised as trade policy, and it's absolutely going to reshape supply chains worldwide.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the global manufacturing shift. Then, what CBAM actually is. Third, the clean competitive advantage. And we'll wrap up with the future of green industry. Let's do this.
Part 1. The global manufacturing shift and the old rules of trade.
To really appreciate where we're going, we first have to understand the traditional logic that's driven global supply chains for the last half-century. For decades, the golden rule of global manufacturing was incredibly simple. Cheaper is better, regardless of the carbon emissions. If a factory halfway across the world could churn out massive quantities of steel, cement, or aluminum for pennies on the dollar by burning cheap, totally unregulated coal, well, they won the contract. Period. It didn't matter if a domestic plant right down the street had way cleaner technology or tighter environmental standards. Because the hidden cost of those massive carbon emissions was completely ignored on the balance sheet, that dirty manufacturing consistently undercut clean domestic industries. It was just a terribly uneven playing field where trying to do the right thing actually penalized you economically. But the era of the free pass for global emissions? It's rapidly closing.
Which brings us to part 2. What exactly is CBAM?
Okay, so here is the game-changing solution that absolutely disrupts that old manufacturing rule we were just talking about. It's called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. I know, it sounds like a mouthful of bureaucratic alphabet soup, but honestly, just think of it simply as a giant carbon toll booth. When goods try to cross the border into a regulated market, they have to pass through this toll booth. If those imported goods were made using highly polluting, carbon-intensive methods, they get slapped with a hefty fee right there at the border to account for those emissions. It essentially calculates the carbon footprint of that cheap imported steel or fertilizer and forces the importer to literally pay the difference. Suddenly, that artificially cheap price tag, yeah, it isn't so cheap anymore.
Moving right along to part 3, the clean competitive advantage.
This carbon toll booth completely rewrites the DNA of economic competitiveness across the board. Think about traditional manufacturing. Historically, this model relied heavily on cheap labor and high emissions. But now, under this new framework, it gets severely penalized at the border. The old cost advantage simply evaporates. Now compare that to green manufacturing. It's powered by clean energy, optimized for efficiency, and crucially, it faces zero CBAM penalties. Do you see what happens here? The toll booth effectively erases the artificial discount of dirty manufacturing. Green manufacturing isn't just an eco-friendly alternative anymore, it becomes a highly valuable, purely economical choice. You aren't just saving the planet, you are saving massive amounts of capital right at the customs gate.
Let's actually walk through how this plays out in the real world. Imagine step 1. An importer attempts to bring in a massive shipment of heavily polluting, dirty steel. Under the old rules, they just flood the market and win on price. But now, we hit step 2. That importer hits the CBAM toll booth and is forced to pay a massive carbon tax at the border, directly proportionate to the pollution created while making that steel. The price instantly spikes. Which leads us to the critical outcome in step 3. Clean, domestically produced steel, which didn't have to pay that border penalty because its emissions are demonstrably low, suddenly becomes the cheaper, preferred option for buyers. The entire supply chain pivots because the raw math simply demands it. Clean production wins the market. And finally, part 4. The future of green industry.
Let's synthesize what this massive paradigm shift means for the global landscape going forward. First up, the new system heavily penalizes carbon-intensive imports. You really can't just offshore your pollution to unregulated countries anymore and expect to sell into premium markets without paying the piper. Second, it fundamentally levels the playing field for domestic producers who have invested heavily in green technology but were previously punished by cheap, dirty imports. And third, and honestly most importantly, it crowns clean manufacturing as the new economic king. I want to emphasize this heavily. Investing in clean manufacturing is no longer just some nice environmental PR goal. It is absolutely the definitive, cutthroat business strategy required to survive and dominate the market of the future.
So, I want to leave you with a pretty vital question. Is your industry ready for the new green reality? Because this shift is no longer theoretical. The carbon toll booths are actively being built. Whether you're a consumer buying products, an investor looking at supply chains, or a business leader making big manufacturing decisions, the rules of the game have permanently changed. If you're still betting on the old paradigm where emissions are free, you are going to be left paying the bill. Take some time to think about how this macroeconomic shift impacts your world, the products you buy, and the businesses you run. Thanks so much for checking out this explainer, and I hope it helps you navigate this super exciting new era of the green competitive advantage.